Okay, so hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to this evening, to this event with Dare IT. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you can hear us. So drop us a little comment, drop us a note, say hi, let us know, can you hear us? And also maybe let us know where you're dialing in from. I'm based in Warsaw today. Janeta also in Warsaw, I think. And Javeria, where are you based today?
I'm in San Francisco.
Okay, so Javeria still has her whole day in front of her. Lots of hopes still for the day. Great. So yes, say hi, drop us a line. Where are you listening in from? And actually, most importantly, can you hear us? And we'll wait a little bit longer also to make sure everyone is here. Actually, I'm wondering what energy level you're at today. I had a very energizing day, a lot of meetings. So I'm feeling like a 9 today. How about all of you? What are you feeling today? Are you a 3? Are you a 10? Are you a 5? Let us know in the chat and say hi. I see hi, Krzysiek. Good to see you. Okay. So let's get started then. Not to be rude, I will introduce myself and say a couple of words so you know who I am and who's talking to you. My name is Natalie Filling. I'm the co-founder of Dare IT. Dare IT is an impact business. We have a mission to increase the number of women and increase diversity in the tech industry, as some of you may know. We engage in a lot of different activities related all about sharing knowledge, network, and connections and jobs with women in tech, and of course also employers and companies in the tech world. So, of course, follow us on social media and find out about the latest events that we're running and what's going on in the community, as well as joining our newsletter if you want to get some bi-weekly dose of knowledge and motivation. So I'm going to drop the links here in the chat if that works. Nope. Well, I will drop them in a second. And right, before we get started with today's webinar, just a few notes on housekeeping. The presentation will start in a minute or two and will guide you through tonight's topic. And of course, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So please post your questions in the chat as we go through the presentation. So we'll get to them in the Q&A section and hopefully be able to answer all your burning questions for this evening. All right, so what is this evening about? This evening, we're talking about cloud and cloud engineering. And I found this a quite interesting topic because you just hear about clouds basically everywhere, and everything is now done in the cloud. Everyone's moving to the cloud. We're moving to the cloud. But what is cloud really? And frankly speaking, if you ask me, and I've been in the IT industry for quite a few years by now, if you ask me for an explanation, I would probably start mumbling some quite confused explanation of what it is. So I'm quite excited for this webinar and for this presentation tonight because thankfully we have Javeria Khan from Snowflake here today who will enlighten us on this topic and talk a little bit more about cloud and cloud engineering, especially for beginners. So before we pass over the mic to today's speakers, just a few words. We have here today Javeria Khan and Janeta Sienkiewicz from Snowflake. Thank you very much for being here tonight and welcome. A few words about both of you or both of them. Javeria is a senior software engineer at Snowflake. She's graduated from Imperial College London with an MA in electrical and electronics engineering, and has several years of experience of working in the field of infrastructure software, 7 to be precise, and 4 years experience with Kubernetes. So You can trust what she will tell you. In her current positions, she supports the construction and maintenance of Snowflake's container platform. That's like a tongue twister. And yes, so she will tell you more today about cloud and cloud engineering, as I mentioned. And also with us today, Żaneta Sienkiewicz, Senior Technical Recruiter from Snowflake, hiring for the Warsaw and Berlin teams. And she will tell us a little bit more about Snowflake and the opportunities. So without further ado, again, welcome. Thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge with the Dare IT community. Thank you to Snowflake for the support of what we do. And I pass the mic to you.
Okay, hello everyone. I think I will just switch to Polish just to let you know, Javeria, as the audience is in Poland. Także hej, dzięki jeszcze raz za zaproszenie nas dzisiaj. Ja, tak jak Natalia wspomniała, mam na imię Żaneta, zajmuję się rekrutacją w Snowflake'u, dołączyłam do zespołu całkiem niedawno, bo w październiku, i szukam najlepszych talentów do zespołu warszawskiego i do zespołu w Berlinie. I dzisiaj chciałabym Wam zrobić takie krótkie intro o tym, jak Snowflake powstał, co robimy i jak to się w ogóle stało, że w Polsce jesteśmy. Platforma Snowflake oferuje wszystkie narzędzia niezbędne do przechowywania, pobierania, analizowania i przetwarzania danych z jednego łatwo dostępnego i skalowalnego systemu. Jeżeli chodzi o samą firmę, została ona założona w Dolinie Krzemowej w 2012 roku. I tutaj historia jest taka, że jednym z 3 założycieli jest Polak, Marcin Żukowski. Jeżeli chodzi o polskie korzenie, to nasz CTO Greg Czajkowski również z Polski pochodzi. Stąd też duża chęć, żeby ten oddział polski po latach powstał. No i udało się to w zeszłym roku w lutym, także akurat teraz mamy rocznicę tego powstania tego polskiego oddziału. W lutym udało się otworzyć oddział Snowflake Polska poprzez przejęcie Polidei, software house'u, który działał na rynku warszawskim. No i już po przejęciu Polidei mieliśmy kilkadziesiąt wykwalifikowanych inżynierów i inżynierek na pokładzie, którzy też fajnie ze sobą współpracowali. I od tamtej pory cały czas dotrudniamy kolejne osoby. W styczniu tego roku przejęliśmy kolejny warszawski software house, Pragmatis. W tym momencie w warszawskim oddziale jest 120 osób. No i tutaj ważna informacja dla Was, że cały czas szukamy, cały czas się powiększamy i też w tym roku planujemy otwierać się bardziej i na stażystów, i na juniorów do naszego zespołu. Zatrudniliśmy bardzo dużo seniorów, ten core zespołu już jest zbudowany, więc teraz też chętnie przyjmiemy na pokład osoby, które chcą się uczyć i rozwijać. Jeżeli chodzi o ten oddział warszawski, to on się dzieli na 2 działki, na tak zwany software engineering i na zespół cloud. W software engineeringu zajmujemy się obecnie 3 tematami. Nie dotykamy tutaj w Warszawie core'u Snowflake'a, ale budujemy wszystko, co jest dookoła. Pierwszą z rzeczy, którą się zajmujemy, to są konektory, czyli narzędzia do migracji danych do Snowflake'a. Drugi zespół zajmuje się tak zwanymi appsami, czyli buduje całe UI dla klientów, no i trzeci zespół zajmuje się różnymi internal toolsami. Ponadto w Warszawie niedawno zaczęliśmy też mocno rozwijać i budować zespół clouda, a 2 lata temu, we wrześniu 2020 roku, Snowflake stał się spółką notowaną na giełdzie nowojorskiej, także jesteśmy już firmą publiczną. Był to najlepszy debiut od 2008 roku z początkową ceną ofertową $120. Pod koniec pierwszego dnia notowań kurs akcji Snowflake'a wzrósł i przekroczył $250. Przy tej cenie Snowflake wyceniono na $70 miliardów, co jest największą wyceną IPO w historii w historii firmy produkujących oprogramowanie. Tak, trochę się chwalę, ale jesteśmy z tego bardzo dumni, cały czas Snowflake się rozwija, cały czas rośniemy. No i jestem tutaj też po to, żeby powiedzieć Wam o potencjalnej ofercie, którą dla chętnych kandydatów mamy. Mam nadzieję, że tutaj Natalia za chwilkę wrzuci link do naszej warszawskiej strony kariery. Na tej stronie możecie spojrzeć, jak wygląda nasz proces rekrutacji, jakie benefity oferujemy, gdzie jesteśmy, kto u nas pracuje i trochę więcej poczytać o tym, co u nas się dzieje. Ta lista benefitów jest bardzo duża. Jeżeli chodzi o naszą ofertę, to my mamy też takie 3 składowe, konkurencyjne na rynku polskim, warszawskim wynagrodzenie, które składa się i z bazy, i z bonusu, i z pakietu akcji. Ale myślę, że też bardzo ważnym aspektem jest to, że pomimo tego, że jesteśmy wielką firmą globalną, to ten oddział warszawski jeszcze jest dosyć mały, a to oznacza też, że możecie mieć duży wpływ na to, co budujemy. Faktycznie te projekty, które są tworzone w Warszawie, one powstają od zera, więc tutaj duży wpływ na rozwój produktu, duża decyzyjność, myślę, że to też są gdzieś tam plusy pracy z nami. I chyba to by było na tyle w ramach takiego wstępu o samej firmie. Jeżeli byście chcieli o coś dopytać, to jestem tutaj do końca eventu z Wami, chętnie odpowiem. Gdyby też w przyszłości były jakieś pytania, to możecie się z nami kontaktować przez stronę kariery. Okay, and I think I will just introduce Javeria and give a mic to her. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Javeria. Thank you for attending this session today. I guess we can shortly get started. Are the slides also shared? Okay, there they are. Okay, perfect. So thanks again for attending this webinar today. My name is Javeria Khan, as I was just introduced, and I will be talking about cloud engineering as a career path and basically my journey into it and why you should consider it as a good career path as well. So please feel free to stop me in the middle of the presentation. If you have any questions, I will try to answer your questions live as well, but basically let's get started. So the agenda for today's talk is I will basically cover, I'll introduce what cloud engineering is, why I think it makes a great career choice, and then I will go into some details about what exactly it is that we cloud engineers do and what our day kind of looks like. And then basically what are the skills that these kinds of roles are expected to have and where you can actually get these kinds of skills, as well as the kind of domain knowledge and the things that it exposes you to through this job, or the things that cloud engineers usually know about. And then lastly, I will share some insight into what paths you can take to actually enter this field and what resources can help you get started with those skill sets and how you can enter it. So I'll just start by talking a little bit about myself. Firstly, I did my bachelor's in computer engineering, which focused on the hardware side of things. And then I did my master's in electrical and electronic engineering, which also had a specialization in integrated circuit design. And I spent about the first 3 years of my career working as a hardware IC design engineer, which involves basically doing digital circuit design for ASICs or FPGAs. And as you can see, it's quite different from the software field that I'm in right now. I switched to the software side a little after that, and that's basically how my skill set just gradually shifted towards more of a cloud-based role. That shift from hardware to software, I would say, would probably be the biggest pivot of my career, because at that point, when I did the shift, obviously because I had already done the academic studying for that specialized hardware field, I had also worked for 3 years. The work was very researchy, and we also filed patents, and we also did lots of deep digital circuit design research. I felt that I was pretty well settled in that field. The software job I took up later happened to just be a sort of something to fill the time, as I was in between jobs and somebody had recommended a startup that was in my area that was doing cool stuff. So I said, okay, let me, I had just finished my master's. I thought I would just try this for a little while. I happen to really like it, the work, and that's basically just how it took off. And since then, I've just been in the software domain since then. Now, this was about 7 years ago. And when I made that shift into software, I had never worked on Linux before, because all the tools that we used to use on the hardware side were like written for Windows, like all the FPGA designing and Xilinx software and everything runs on Windows. They didn't have native Linux support at the time. So for me, starting from like the very bottom again was challenging. It was different. So never touched Linux before. I had never done software programming before, because hardware has its own languages such as Verilog and VHDL. With software, I started with Python. I've never done Python again. But where I'm going with this is you can definitely at any point decide to make the shift, and these are skills that you can acquire regardless of whether you had studied for them before or not. So basically, when I made the shift, and then since then, those 7 years since then that I've been working in the software domain, and it's slowly gotten more and more towards the cloud side. The roles I've had are the titles are basically that I've had since then are systems engineer, and then SRE, which is site reliability engineering, and now software engineering for cloud platforms. However, the work I would say is more or less similar between all these roles, and as I'll come to later, these are basically just different terminologies within the cloud engineering domain. However, as a part of these different infrastructure teams, which has spanned over startups, and I've also done enterprise on-prem, and now at Snowflake, which is multi-cloud, my experience is mainly around managing high volume deployments and supporting infrastructure buildup with a special focus on Kubernetes, which I've been working in for all of these past 4 or 5 years or so. Here at Snowflake, I am currently a part of the container platform team in the cloud engineering org, and I support building and maintaining this platform that comprises multi-cloud Kubernetes clusters. Okay, so let's get into the detail of it. What is cloud engineering, first of all? So as I was just sharing all the different titles I've had over the past few years, as you can see, cloud engineering itself is referred to by many names in the industry here. So you'll hear it being called infrastructure engineering, or SRE, which is site reliability engineering, which is a term that Google made popular. You'll also hear it called DevOps, or platform, or production engineering, etc. But basically, in a nutshell, companies that hire cloud engineers are often basically just looking to deploy cloud services, or they're trying to scale up their usage of cloud resources, or basically they're also just trying to improve their understanding of cloud technology, and find a good way to port over their services to it. For lots of older enterprise companies, they have stuff running on-prem, which is basically physical servers running in data centers. Now, cloud offers a completely different type of optimization, where you don't have to now manage these machines by yourself. So that shift from on-prem enterprise to the cloud is also what a lot of companies are doing these days, and that's where they need cloud engineers on their team. So a cloud engineer, as I said, is basically responsible for any technical duties associated with cloud computing, and these kind of include designing and planning and management and maintenance and support for any kind of cloud services. And all of these duties, they can apply to infrastructures that they're a hybrid of on-prem, which are the physical machines and data centers, but then also cloud platforms such as AWS or GCP or Azure. And lastly, and very popular these days, is the container platforms such as Kubernetes. So now that you have a little basic understanding of what cloud engineering is, why would you choose cloud engineering as a career path? As I'm sure a lot of people have seen, tech or software itself generally is considered a well-paying job, but cloud engineering specifically is also usually ranked as one of the highest-paying jobs across industries. And this is mainly due to the fact that there's a wide range of skills that cloud engineers are expected to have. These cloud skills are very high in demand, to a point where actually some analysts have said that a career in cloud may be almost future-proofed. And how the future may not be sure, but cloud computing itself has been one of, and often the single most in-demand skills for the last, I would say, 6 or 7 years or so since I started working. And cloud itself is very exciting. It's a very dynamic field. It changes rapidly, and it's obviously seeing a very steady demand in IT right now. So gaining the skills to work with the cloud can really help you carve out like an interesting career that helps organizations stay at like the forefront of technological innovation. And then cloud computing itself is also a field that's expected to grow in the next decade even more as companies continue to adopt cloud technologies. As I've been seeing more recently, any new startups, they just begin with the cloud to start with because nobody has the time and resources to actually go and invest in on-prem infrastructure anymore. With the cloud, you only pay for as much as you use. So you only pay for the amount of servers that you're using or the data that you're passing through them, which is a very, very good model for companies that are just getting started. And then even for all older enterprise grade companies, it's just more cost effective to like move whatever services they were hosting on their data centers to just move them to the cloud. So this ability to work with any cloud technology is definitely one of the most in-demand skill sets here in the software IT industry, along with things such as cybersecurity and database management, which are also very hot fields. And then beyond these, just as an engineer itself or a person who likes technology, I would say as an engineering discipline, it really gives you a wider breadth of expertise over more domains than any other engineering field. And that's why you'll notice that a lot of cloud engineers know a little bit about a lot of different things from like databases to networking to programming to virtualization, etc. And this is precisely what makes it a very marketable skill set to have. So what exactly do cloud engineers do? Or what do I spend my time doing? Obviously, cloud engineers, they work on the cloud. The most popular ones or the most commonly known ones are obviously AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud. And then there's a few others on the other side of the world as well. But cloud engineers, they take on a range of technical duties related to cloud computing. Now, these can be basically designing the software to implement cloud systems, but basically also cloud engineers are responsible for things like, for example, helping organizations migrate their cloud systems, computer systems to like the cloud, like their enterprise systems running on machines to cloud. Or cloud engineers are also working on configuring cloud infrastructure components like networking or security systems, because now you have this whole ecosystem within your cloud infrastructure, which is also the networking component and the security systems and the data transfers and the databases. So you have different types of cloud engineers that are focused on these different domains working on these things. We also work on creating applications, for example, and databases that perform on the cloud. Also, monitoring and logging is a huge field where cloud management and data storage services are something that cloud engineers are also working on configuring and using. I've just listed a few tools down on that slide, but these are some of the popular things that we work with, or some of the popular platform tools for provisioning, such as Terraform, Ansible, Pulumi. These are the things that help you set up cloud servers and like networking, all the config basically that you use to create infrastructure on the cloud. And then for CI/CD is how you do Docker builds and you build your binaries and how you get them to like your end target host. Jenkins is pretty popular. I'm pretty sure everybody in engineering must have heard of it. Then GitLab or Spinnaker, and then there's a host of other ones as well for CI/CD. Then there are observability cloud engineers, which are very focused on like the monitoring and logging and observability piece of the cloud infrastructure that you have. Some of the most popular softwares on this side are, for example, Prometheus or Grafana or Wavefront, or these are all basically dashboards where you can see your metrics and you can visualize the data coming in from your systems, or Splunk or Datadog or Fluentd, or those kinds of things. So now that you know what cloud engineering is and you know kind of what we do, what are the skill sets that you're expected to have? Now, I don't want this to be too daunting. This isn't something that you're expected to have as you apply for interviews or as you're trying to get hired. This is basically a whole like spectrum of things that you learn as you go on the job. This is certainly stuff that I've learned over the past years that I've been in this domain, slowly over time as I've gotten exposed to just different systems. But take this as something that you take this as everything that you would be able to touch and learn as you enter this field. So anybody who's been here for a while, they're expected to have a proficiency, for example, in the following areas. So starting from the left, for example, obviously you need an understanding of cloud providers. So as technical cloud features and engineering practices, they can vary between these different service providers. Understanding what each of them offers can really enhance your knowledge, and it can make you really more marketable as an employer to employers. Second is programming. Cloud engineers definitely need to have strong general programming skills. Some of the common languages we use on this side include Python, Java. Less frequently, I've seen Golang is pretty popular these days because Kubernetes and all these containerized platforms are also implemented in it. Bash is also obviously not a language, but also a very important skill set to have. As I'll mention Linux later, because Linux is sort of the de facto platform most cloud services are implemented on. And then there's containerization. Now, I briefly mentioned Kubernetes before. The team I work in here in Snowflake is especially focused on our Kubernetes infrastructure, which is basically all the Kubernetes clusters deployed on our clouds. For anybody who's not familiar, just simply think of Kubernetes or Docker containerization as like a further layer of virtualization on top of VM. So VM gives you like one level of virtualization, and then if you go even further, containers, you can run many of these within a single VM. So it gives you even further isolation for your code and for your services. And then now there's a whole ecosystem and like a whole skill set based on how to manage these systems and how to like create and do lifecycle management for containerized platforms. So obviously proficiency with Docker and Kubernetes is really popular. There's a whole open source cloud native ecosystem around this. They have some of the biggest conferences over the year. There's certifications you can also get for this specific domain. It's also a very marketable skill to have right now. Then comes networking. Now, networking is a very important engineering knowledge to have, regardless of whether you're a cloud engineer or a software engineer, because it really helps augment like the full set of knowledge you would have about how a software is running and how it's interacting with other softwares. So knowledge of like the networking basics and like obviously how virtual networks are how they work is very important, especially in like a cloud context, so that you know how they're useful in like integrating your networks with like other cloud services. Then DevOps, it's a very popular term as well. It has been over the past few years, but it's a popular framework for cloud engineering. So having a hands-on understanding of like DevOps practices is very valuable. And DevOps, particularly the AWS DevOps, is a very sought after skill by cloud providers. They even have a special certification track for AWS DevOps that you can take. Then comes database skills, basically around how to access and store and protect data are also very important parts of a cloud worker's job. Cloud database management skills and the knowledge of things like MySQL or Hadoop are really helpful. Then we have APIs and like web services. So knowledge about how application programming interfaces or APIs work are also pretty important, because a lot of the scripting and a lot of the automation we're building is usually around calling cloud APIs and how to be able to do any cloud provisioning functions through your automation. You need to know how to interact with those APIs through the language of your choice. Then comes virtualization. This ties into the containerized thing I was talking about before, but then again, virtualization in itself is also knowing how to deploy and run and configure virtual machines. Even though there has been a big movement towards like that further layer of virtualization, which is Dockers and containers. VMs aren't going anywhere. So even in Snowflake, a lot of our infrastructure is still also VM based. And you'll see this also at many other companies. A lot of services are still using VMs. So knowledge of how to like use and configure those systems is also very important. Then we come to web services. This ties into the APIs that I just mentioned. General knowledge of web services and APIs and how to interact with them is important. Other than Linux, this is, I would say, one of the most, if not the most important skill over here, because we're really required to have a strong understanding of Linux operating systems. This is basically because companies frequently basically use this for all of their cloud development. And an understanding of the architecture, the maintenance, the administration of Linux servers is also very important. And as any of you who have gone through interviews for like this domain or are thinking about it, this is always one of the main things that you will also be interviewed on. Basic Linux commands, like how would you do things like checking memory or like checking storage and checking open file handles or ports. How would you do basic troubleshooting with Linux VMs and basic networking commands? So those things are also good to have. And very lastly is security. Now, this is one of the most fastest growing priorities right now, because basically the knowledge of cybersecurity in the context of a cloud is a very, very valuable asset to any kind of company. And this specific subdomain, which is cloud security engineers, is also something that a lot of companies are trying to hire these days, and there's not enough people with these skill sets, I would say, around. So as I touched upon the skills that were required to have, basically just briefly, the architecture here at Snowflake, it's multi-cloud. It's because we use AWS and GCP and Azure at the same time, and we're also now looking into other clouds as well. But all of the engineers in our organization, the cloud engineering organization, they tend to be familiar with all three clouds, even if their work is more focused on like a particular one. Myself, when I joined here, I had only ever worked on AWS and GCP, so Azure was new for me, and I also just happened to be more focused on the Azure side here at Snowflake. So it doesn't matter which skill sets you manage to acquire for like one particular like cloud platform. I would say the knowledge itself is transferable and it's applicable to all three because the concepts are similar. And all of the systems that the design here and then that we work on here in Snowflake, we do so with like a focus on making sure that they're cloud agnostic. So that means that they can work on all three clouds in the same way and they support all three clouds similarly. So I hope I've interested you in this field now. And you're wondering how, now I don't have an academic degree or I haven't studied for this field. How do I get into it? Well, the path to starting a career in cloud engineering, obviously the one traditional way is to have a bachelor's or a master's in a computer science degree, which will basically obviously give you a basis for general computing concepts, and it probably also will give you exposure to some programming languages. However, most of the skills that I just mentioned before, they aren't quite taught in computer science degrees at the moment, or not in any of the graduates that I've seen so far. And a lot of the people that enter this field, they do so through basically work-related experience, like I did over time. Or if that's not possible, because obviously it's hard to get entered into a field when you have no prior experience with it, you can do it on your own time. And people do it through spending time learning these skills by themselves. Now, cloud engineers, they especially benefit from specialized training in 2K areas. First of all, you should gain hands-on experience with these platforms. And secondly, you need to understand how cloud resources are allocated and paid for. Because everything on the cloud is basically more of a pay-as-you-go. Everything you use, you only pay for that much. So having an understanding of the systems you're building with a special focus on like what cost is associated with them is a very important skill set to have. So I would say the most generic skills you can work on are learning any of these programming languages. I mentioned a few before as well, but Bash or Python or Golang are pretty popular these days. And then the other part was you can gain related hands-on experience through internships, or there's a lot of open source projects you can start getting involved in. There's a lot of tutorials online. And lastly, one method that's quite popular these days is doing certifications for cloud providers or platforms such as Kubernetes. And having these later certifications on your resumes, even if you don't have the related work experience, really shows prospective employers that you first have the determination and incentive to learn new skills, which is obviously very important in the cloud field, which changes so rapidly and which is so dynamic. And secondly, it also kind of makes up for a lack in work experience because they know you've now spent time learning for the certification and taking the exam. So you're familiar with the basic skill sets to come and start contributing. I'll take a very brief pause here to see if anybody has questions about what I've talked about so far, because I'll get into some details about certifications now.
Hi, Javeria. I'm just gonna drop in and see. I think we had a question earlier. Just let me find it. Actually, it's about recruitment at Snowflake, so maybe we can leave this at the end when Janetta will join us back on stage. In the meantime, if you have any questions that you want to ask, drop them in the chat. I know we have usually a little bit of a lag, so we can wait a couple of seconds. You can have a sip of water and let's see. Okay, I don't see anything right now, so I think we can continue. If not, we can. If we see any other questions, we will get back to them at the end.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. So, yep, I'll see you later.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. So jumping back into the content, we were just talking about how you would get into cloud engineering and what the path looks like. Now, I mentioned certification, so even if you didn't take a degree for like basic computer science, this is what you can do on your own to make an entry here. So talking a little bit more about certifications here, basically because these will be your gates for like anybody looking to enter this field, even without a related academic degree. Starting with AWS, these are some of the highest paying certifications in tech, and they're typically, you'll see them appear in most job board search sites, or you'll see them in cloud carriers, or you'll see them in job requirements as companies post them. And like nearly all areas of cloud expertise, the demand for AWS cloud skills basically really outpaces the supply here. And the reason being is that AWS just happens to be the most widely adopted cloud platform in enterprises over the last few years. So all of the companies that have made a shift to the cloud, a majority of them have chosen AWS. Now, AWS has a few different tracks. As you can see, there's something called foundational, and then there's associate, and then there's a professional, and then there's a specialty one, which has very focused tracks. I would say for anybody getting started, the foundational is where you start from, which is the cloud practitioner certification that they have. And then the DevOps engineer one here in the professional at the top is which would probably be pretty relevant, and it would help you gain the skill sets for like getting started with any kind of cloud engineering job. And then secondly, coming to Azure now, the Azure adoption itself, I say, has been increasing pretty rapidly recently, and a lot of enterprises and businesses, they continue to adopt because Microsoft is really pushing into the enterprise space. And I would say this is actually growing faster than AWS over like the last 1 or 2 years. So for Azure itself, I don't have a picture here, but the Azure Fundamental certification is where you would start as well. And then they have something called the Azure Solutions Architect. And then there's one called the Azure Administrator Associate. Now, for Azure, those are the top paying certifications themselves. And then GCP also has a very similar track as well. Same thing there. You would start with the fundamental one first, and then take it from there. And then lastly, Kubernetes itself, as I was mentioning, cloud platforms virtualization is a very, very important, it's a very marketable skill to have these days. A lot of companies are moving towards Kubernetes for their services because it's just more cost effective that way to run your services on microservices rather than VMs. Kubernetes more recently, which is about the last 2 years or so, has also come up with their own kind of certification exams that you can take. Kubernetes also has like this foundational track. You would start with that exam first, but I've linked that slide here. So I know with so many options, it can probably be very confusing, but don't worry about getting locked into like a single path. If you manage to like touch different ones of these, I would say multi-cloud skills are very, very high in demand. So you can easily hop around between the cloud providers once you have the basics covered, and you can make yourself even more desirable if you manage to touch more of them to potential employers in the process. And then to take these certifications, there are plenty of tools and skills that work across clouds that are really worth time investing in. I mentioned DevOps before, but yes, like the DevOps track for AWS or the DevOps skills themselves, and then Kubernetes is also, it applies to all clouds. These are good skills to have across cloud platforms. And for building the skills, you would need to get certified. So getting a certification basically just means you need to take their exam and pass it. But how do you study for that, and how do you like get prepared for that? You would choose a training program that provides hands-on experience first, so that you can put what you learn into action, and you can keep developing your skills while you're looking for a job. And then earning a certification also proves that you know about cloud computing. And even if it doesn't add work experience to your resume, this hands-on experience that you've done during your certifications really shows that you can put it into action. Earning certifications can give you a competitive advantage, and it's really taking the proper steps to ensure that you put your knowledge into practice, which will advance your career. So I know there's a lot of choices here, and as you're thinking about where to get started, I would say the most important things, first of all, for taking certifications is studying for this is obviously very, very important, but then also getting the hands-on experience is also very important for cloud technologies. Learning by doing is the key in this domain, I would say. And most cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, all of them basically provide this access for free accounts that you can just create and start using to play around with their services. Or you can also sign up for like a skills development platform like a Cloud Guru, and they have like hands-on labs, and they also have something called the Cloud Playground, which makes it really easy to like learn by doing without like any fears of like breaking anything, or because cloud services need to be paid for, or any fear of like racking up a really big cloud bill. Um, Besides these, there's also lots of Udemy courses on each of these kinds of certifications. I know Udemy has a lot of tracks for AWS certifications. You can watch those videos as well. Those are obviously all paid for subscription, but then YouTube itself has a lots of lectures that you can just watch. All of these domains host really big conferences every year. The conferences have many sessions and lectures that are always recorded, so you can always go back and watch them too. Those are great learning resources as well. So as you spend time getting familiar with all of these technologies on your own pace, and then basically when you're ready to take them, you just get certified. And then you go and you take the exam in person, or you can take the exam online. So basically that's it from my side. I hope this presentation was useful, and we are very actively hiring here at Snowflake, and especially in my team and my org. So please do reach out, and also feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or for further guidance. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Javeria, for your presentation, for sharing very practical tips on how to get started and what's useful to have to join or to move into this career path. We have a few questions. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, both to Janetta or to Javeria, so about the topic of this evening about cloud engineering, how to get started, or about Snowflake and opportunities there, drop them in the chat and we will get to them. I have a first question here, which I guess is more for you, Jonathan, and that's how fast after initial screening should we receive feedback as a candidate if we got into technical interview or not?
Okay, so I'm happy to answer that one. So it depends, because in most cases we are like ready to give you feedback right away on the meeting, just after the interview. And sometimes we need to discuss it with a hiring manager. So in those cases, you should wait like 1 or at maximum 2 days. But very often we just give you a feedback at the end of the meeting, and you know if you'll go to the next step or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question we have about trainings and certifications. So the question here is, have you heard of Cloud Guru that provides trainings in AWS? If yes, what is your opinion of them?
Yep, I actually just mentioned them on my second last slide. So that's definitely a good resource to get started with. Our company even provides that subscription to like new hires. So ones that aren't so familiar with like other clouds, because obviously we're multi-cloud. So we let new hires watch their trainings and go through their training programs. So I would say it's a good place to get started. And as I mentioned, their hands-on labs are good, and their playground is also very useful to get familiar with these features and to get familiar with cloud services.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Oh, this is much nicer. We can see everyone. Great, thank you. Another question about certificates. I guess that this is something quite relevant, as you mentioned, as a way to get in, especially without formal education background in this. So which certificate do you think is the most valuable? I mean, preparing for which gives me the most useful skills, for instance, for your position. And I know you mentioned quite a few of them, but I can identify that sometimes it's you know, the how do you say, the paradox of choice, it just makes it much harder to know. So any advice here?
Definitely. It's pretty confusing. I know there's like too many of them. I would say pick a cloud first. Anyone is fine, and pick their foundational track. If you really are still confused, start with AWS, because for a lot of their services, I would say in many things it's easier to understand their concepts. So pick their foundational track, take that one, and then in parallel to that, for Kubernetes, which is also a very good skill set, like for my position, specifically for my team, Kubernetes has their first certification called Associate. It's called the Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate. So take that one. That will give you basics of like running Kubernetes clusters and all the basic knowledge that you would have. So if you just aim for these two, that's a very good starting point.
Great, thank you. And we have the next question from the same person, actually. And that is, what do you suggest to be prepared for on interviews for a pretty experienced GCP admin? You're smiling. I want to hear your answer, and then I want to know why you're smiling.
So the way we take interviews on our side for specifically cloud engineering positions, depending on what team they're in, I would say the common element is definitely one part of it is programming. Somebody will take a programming like round. The choice of language is yours, but you'll be asked to like implement like a simple functionality, which is something relevant to what we do here. So you might be doing like log ingestion, or it's like parsing buffers, or like doing something that's relevant to the field. So what we're trying to see is if your programming skills are up to match. And then one round will be based on cloud knowledge. Now you said GCP. If somebody from GCP is taking your round, they will check to see if you have the basic concepts, like, do you understand GCP networking? Do you understand how GCP compute works? You might be asked about a few different services. You might be asked about what kind of load balancers does GCP give you? If you have experience with their Kubernetes platform, for example, GK, which we use as well, you will be asked about implementing or creating clusters on GK, and like what their upgrade cycles basically look like, or how different operations look like, depending on what your resume says you've done. So we will obviously check what you've done before. So that's the cloud portion of it. We check your basic cloud knowledge. And then we have this basic systems and networking round where we're checking to see if you have like basic Linux skills. Do you understand what like the basic commands are, or like basic troubleshooting scenarios? We'll see if you know like common networking commands. Do you know how to check like how DNS resolution works? Do you know how to check if systems can't talk to each other? What kind of things would you look for? um, Linux itself, you know how to troubleshoot the system. Do you have an understanding of the operating system, the file system, things like that? I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you. And why
I
were
think
you
it's also
smiling? So, Janetta, you go first, and then
yeah, I think it's also good to add that when you do the recruitment, when you recruit to Snowflake, it's like on each stage you receive like very detailed description on next stage, like how to prepare, so you can be sure that you will have that info at each stage, and that should be helpful as well.
Great, thank you. And while Javiera tells us why she was smiling, I have a few questions from the Facebook chat that I will add here. So, what made you laugh about the question? Is it something that because is it something that you get a lot, or because it always depends, or yeah?
No, I was smiling because I thought that was a very focused and intelligent question to ask. That person was right on point, because they wanted to know like what domains we covered and what experience they have and how that would be relevant. So good job.
Okay, so kudos. Great, thank you. So as a next question, we have, and he or she say thank you. So I think you answered their question. As a next question, that is, how do internships look like at Snowflake? Do you offer them? If yes, what kind of positions? What do you do? What are your requirements, etc.?
Would you like me to answer that, or Zanetta, would you like to take it?
I can start, and if you would have any additional, maybe you could add something. Because for us here in Warsaw, it will be something totally new. I don't know, maybe you have more experience, Javaria, in California. But when it comes to Warsaw office, we plan to do it for the first time this year. And to be honest, I have just basic information that we want to do the internship, and I can ask you to follow our career site, to follow Snowflake on LinkedIn, and you can as well contact me, and once we'll have the complete info, we'll let you know. But this is something that will be totally new here in Warsaw. So maybe Javaria, you have some more experience how it looks in California.
So we have an internship program that runs every year. They have specific internship cohorts. I think they're seasonal, but we have had interns like work with us over like the entire year as well. I believe that Carrier's page that you shared probably also has postings for internships, so you can look at the requirements. But what we're generally, or what any of the teams at Snowflake are obviously looking for interns is either fresh graduates or somebody who's in the last year of their degree. So you'll join us for a couple of months over the summer or over the fall, as whatever the time period is. And you'll spend those months working with that team on that specific topic. Um, Definitely, I think you can just apply through the careers page in that internship position itself, that is, because we post them on the same thing.
Great, thank you. Janetta, maybe we could also share your email address, as you mentioned, or LinkedIn profile if somebody would like to contact you directly. So we can add that in the chat. Great. We have a next question, which is from Kasia, and that is: do you have to live in Warsaw to get? Sorry, do you have to live in Poland to get the job in Warsaw?
And it's like it seems like my favorite answer is it depends, because I will start with the same one. Yeah, it depends on the manager of the team. So some managers want you to be more often in the Warsaw office. Some of them want you to just attend some meetings, and the other they work remotely. So it's good to reach out directly to me, and I will let you know. Right now, during the COVID situation, like those, we are working fully remotely. But once the pandemic will be like in a better state or will be over, we'll be returning to the offices in some hybrid models, but this hybrid model depends on the manager.
Right, thank you. By the way, I've shared Janetta's LinkedIn profile in the chat, so feel free to connect if you have any questions about job opportunities or if you have questions about requirements, etc. I will also drop the link to the careers page again, so you can have a look at the open positions and have a scroll through. Let's see. For now, I didn't see any open questions. Let's see on Facebook. Nothing here. Just as a note, this recording will be available on the DareIT YouTube channel, so you can come back to all the resources that Javeria shared earlier, and you can have a look at them again. If you have any further questions, drop them now. So we still have a few minutes to go through them. Of course, also don't forget to follow the DareIT YouTube channel once you rewatch, so you get updates on any new content and any exciting things happening. Let's see, we have no comments or no questions on our Facebook Live. Let's see here, maybe let's give it a couple of other minutes. Is there anything that, maybe I can take this off the screen, actually, the question. Maybe anything from you, Janetta or Javeria, that you wanted to add still, something that might be relevant for candidates interested in this career path, in this in Snowflake, that you haven't mentioned so far?
I can just add that we have like this really big plans for growing this and next year. So just follow our page. Maybe you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I will be happy to answer all of your questions if there will be any. And also, if you would like to find out a little bit more about technical stuff at Snowflake, if you don't want to, jump into a recruiter call at the beginning, but we want to talk to someone from the cloud or for the engineering, we can as well arrange it and do some intro call with some technical people.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
Same with me. Feel free to reach out if anybody would like help or has questions or anything at all.
Great. Okay, so no more questions. So I think that's it then. So thank you again, Janetta and Javeria, for being here this evening, for talking about cloud engineering and cloud and how to get started. I think a lot of very useful tips and a lot of useful things to know about a topic that might not be, or a career path that might not be let's say the most obvious or talked about, but clearly, as you said, a very not promising, because it has been promising for a few years, but definitely a very a career path which will continue to grow in the next few years. Just a note for our viewers, so don't forget to join our Facebook group and find out more about all the things that we are doing as DareIT. So the link I'm posting here right now it should work. And with that, thanks a lot, and yeah, have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night in Poland.
have a nice rest of the day, Javeria, and see you, and Janetta, nice evening, and to all our viewers, see
You too.
soon on our next event. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.